Well, welcome. Glad you're tuning in. If this is your first time joining us, I'd love to hear from you. So feel free to email me. Love the chance to kind of know who's watching this, who's kind of interacting with us. But if you got a Bible with you or a Bible around you, get it open to Matthew chapter 6. We're going to continue a series that we've been going through on the Sermon on the Mount. And a couple weeks ago, Pastor Jonathan kind of led us through this portion of chapter 6, what Jesus is really trying to get at in the core, in the crux of things. And he's trying to get at our approval, right? It's why I won't wear a suit jacket for a long, long time. Because we said this, that we all are like approval addicts. We want to be seen. We want to be noticed. We want to be recognized. We all struggle to be loved. And so we'll even use religious activities to do this, right? We'll use things like prayer and things like fasting. It's kind of what we did a few weeks ago. We've kind of talked about this. Last week we talked about fasting, and hopefully that kind of left you hungry for more this week. Right? And as we think about this, Jesus, what he says, he continues and he goes on this. He says, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth. I think what Jesus is trying to get at is this, that you and I might actually want to find approval, not just through religious activities, but through our stuff, through our money. There was an old movie that came out, actually probably not that old depending, but called Pirates of the Caribbean. You remember this movie? Pirates of the Caribbean, the first one was great. The first one was top notch, but after that it kind of went downhill. The second one was okay, third one, and then they made like 9 after that or something that I don't even remember what they were about. But the first one's one of my favorites because in the first movie, if you're familiar with the story, Captain Barbossa is Jack's first mate at one point. But there's a mutiny, and Barbossa and his crew now abandon Jack on an island, desert him on an island. He's left there for dead. He somehow manages to get off that island by roping sea turtles together with his back hair or something. That's the legend that has gone on. But as this story unfolds, what you find is these men, Barbossa and his crew, went after this gold, this Aztec gold that was cursed. And there's a part in the movie where Elizabeth, who's the governor's daughter, calls for a parley, which is pirate code for I want to meet with your captain and propose a new way for us to interact with each other right now. And so she's brought to the Black Pearl, the ship. They end up kidnapping her anyway. And on their journey, Barbossa sits down and invites Elizabeth into the captain's quarters, and she's eating in front of him. And he's like watching her very creepily, just kind of staring at her, watching her eat. And he's like, here, try the wine. Here, have an apple, right? If you remember the scene, you're like, what in the world is going on? And he begins to tell her of the curse. And Elizabeth looks at him and she says, I don't believe in ghost stories, Captain Barbossa. And this is my best impression. He goes, aye, that's exactly what I thought first told the tale. Buried in the island of the dead, that which cannot be found except by those who already know where it is. Find it we did, and there be the chest, and inside be the gold, and we took 'em all, and we spent 'em and traded 'em and fitted 'em away for drink, food, and pleasurable company. But the more we gave them away, the more we came to realize the drink could not satisfy, food turned to ash in our mouths, nor the company in the world harm or slake our lust. We are cursed men, Miss Turner, compelled by greed we were, but now we are consumed by it. I don't know if that was pirate or Irish, but honestly, there's this intense scene where they were compelled by greed, and then all of a sudden they're consumed by it. It's fascinating. Jesus says, don't store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. What's he saying? I think if we could think of it like this, that we all have a pirate that lives within us, a scallywag that's in our hearts, that we chase after treasures, riches, and we pillage and plunder and cheat and rob to get more and more stuff for ourselves. As Americans, we love our stuff, from closets to houses to garages. We have so much stuff. The average American has 300,000 items in their homes, from paper clips to books to lamps to electronics. Per year, a person spends $18,000 on, quote, non-essentials. $3,000 a year is entertainment costs alone. Individually, we throw out 81 pounds. Individually, not per house, individually, we throw out 81 pounds of clothing a year because it's too tight, it's too baggy, it's out of style, it doesn't fit anymore. It's so much so that all our stuff is affecting our kids. The average 10-year-old has 238 toys, but only plays with 12 of them a day. If they were to play with 12 toys every single day, it would take them 20 days to play with all their toys. But my oldest son only plays with one toy. His name's Denver. He only plays with Thomas the Train. That's it. We got him all these nice toys, and he plays with one. Maybe the most interesting stat to me was this: 84% of Americans believe that others are more materialistic than they are. We are such a greedy people, and yet none of us think we are. We think others are worse than us. We're not that greedy, right? Could we just agree for a moment to not try and dismiss this right away? Could we try for just a few moments together to not try and justify ourselves before God, but let Jesus in this teaching frustrate our hearts for a moment? Let it press into us. It's interesting to me that Jesus, right in the middle of this, he says something fascinating. He says, the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Jesus is saying greed is tricky. It's a form of self-deception. It'll cause you to chase after gold and find out it's cursed. It will corrode your soul after a long time. Jesus is pressing against the notion that accumulating a bunch of stuff is going to fix the ache in our hearts. See, we have kind of bad math in America. The American dream: get more stuff, have more money, and you'll be happy. Buy more stuff, get more money, equals my happiness. I was talking to somebody this week. They said, man, I've had a tough week. And they said, Ethan, it's just been a tough week. They said, I went out and bought a purse and thought it would make it better. And they said this to me. They said, quote, Ethan, it didn't. All right? We try and buy stuff to make us feel better. Well, what's that do? I think treasures blind us, is what Jesus is saying. Treasures blind us to reality. It's like we look through life through this car window that's got ice all over it. Or it's like dirty, like we can't see properly. It's like glasses that we have on. All our stuff kind of smudges the lenses. It dirties the lenses. It fogs it up. Money and material does this to our souls. That's why Jesus, he takes it very seriously. He says, watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. Jesus is warning us. Why is he warning us? What's he warning us? He's assuming something. He's assuming that you and I will think our stuff is not that big of a deal. He's assuming that we won't see all kinds of greed, but we'll simplify greed. We won't see the layers of it. We'll just simplify it to go, well, the rich struggle with greed, and I'm not as rich as they are. Right? It's almost like he's saying greed is so sneaky. Most sin is actually not all that sneaky, right? There's some sin that is. But if I'm angry at somebody and I hate somebody and I kill them, I kind of know that I murdered somebody, you know? Or if I have lust in my heart and I commit adultery, I kind of know, like, I'm committing adultery here. Like, I know this is wrong. It's not like I wake up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I killed somebody. I had no idea. You're like, no, I'm trying to press that down or trying to ignore it or whatever the case, maybe trying to cover it up. But it's not like I'm blind to it. I kind of know what I'm doing. But greed is different. It's sneaky. It's deceptive. It's a slow burn over an entire lifetime. And it sounds like this: I earned it, so I deserve it. I'm entitled to a little enjoyment. I have a right to some spending money. I heard one comedian say this: it's not old money, it's not blood money, drug money. It's hard-earned good money, right? The comedian went on to say this: when your parents buy you something that you don't really like or you don't really want, they're like, we spent good money on that, right? Good, hard-earned money. And I think that's what we often think, is it's good money. We've earned this money. And I think sometimes you can assume that people that are rich are often greedy. But did you know you can be poor and you can be greedy? You can be poor and you can be generous, and you can also be rich and be generous. See, greed and generosity have nothing to do with what I actually have or how much I have. Greed is so devious because it rarely shows its face directly. Greed has these layers that show up in our lifestyle. Can I show you just a couple layers? I think one layer would be this, that often we have envy purchasing. We have envy purchasing. Comparison controls our spending. So we look on social media, we see moms that have stuff and can do stuff for their kids. We see business success and businessmen who are powerful, and you're like, oh man, I want to keep up with them. We see vacations that families take, and so what we think to ourselves when we look is, I don't have as much as they have. I don't have as much as they have, so I'm not that bad, so I can spend this. Or we look at them and we go, I have more than they have. So we look up or we look down on people, and if I have more than they have, I just kind of assume they're not really good with their finances. They're not as smart or savvy with their finances, or they don't work as hard as I do. That's a layer to greed. Do you see that? There's another layer, I think, that we use microscopic upgrades to max out our budgets. What do I mean? I think we're obsessed with new stuff. We love new stuff. Man, my shirt doesn't look as nice as it once did, so I need to go get a new shirt. My shoes are a little raggedy. Got scuffs, there's a little tear or whatever. I need another pair of shoes. I need a new pair of shoes. Man, my phone, it's 2 years old. I need a new phone. It comes out every 2 years, right? They can get me a great deal on it. We love new stuff. Not only that, I think subscriptions. Subscriptions, we're subscribed to Masterclass, Netflix, Spotify, ESPN, iCloud, HelloFresh, PlayStation Plus, Audible. What happens is these little microscopic upgrades that max out our budgets. I think another layer of greed is our careers. Careers can often keep us locked down for the chase of wanting more. The allure of money can get you into a career that you don't like, and it can keep you there for a long time. I was chatting with somebody once that was almost twice my age, and they looked at me and they said, Ethan, my job has me in a golden handcuff. Has me in a golden handcuff. They said, what happens is every time I think I want to quit, they throw a little money my way, with a bonus or a possibility of a raise. And then the thought, the wonder, the chase of wanting more, the thrill of wanting more. I don't even love my job. My job stresses me out. But it's just a little bit more money that I could have. See, often we don't want to ask hard questions about money and our stuff because we don't want to look. We don't want to look. Sometimes we like being blind. We don't want to see how many things we're subscribed to, right? Because if I knew how much stuff I was subscribed to, I might realize how much money I'm spending on subscriptions that sometimes I don't even use. Do you know there's this thing called Rocket Money? You can subscribe to Rocket Money, and what it will do is it will look through all your subscriptions and cancel things that you don't use anymore. Kind of ironic. We're blind to our money because we don't want to look at it. And so what it does is when we're blind to all the treasures we have, it gives us a sense of false freedom, which is actually not freedom. It's just ignorance. It's just me being ignorant to where my money, where my treasure is actually going. Am I spending so much money trying to keep up with everybody else, trying to keep up with the Joneses, as they say? Am I in a career that's causing me to be unethical? It's causing me to be unconcerned about the environment. It's making me sacrifice my morals. It's doing bad things in our world, or not great things in our world, and yet I'm making good money. So I don't want to give that up. So I don't care. If I got to sacrifice a little morally, if I got to do some things that maybe I don't agree with when it comes to our world, trying to make this place better, I can sacrifice, because I make really good money for it. Treasures, Jesus says, it blinds us. It blinds us in three ways. It blinds us first to God. 1 Timothy chapter 6 says this: those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap, and into many foolish and harmful desires. They plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. It's worth noting that it's the love of money, not money itself. Some people, watch this, some people eager for money have wandered from the faith, and they've pierced themselves with many griefs. Temptations are treasures that will trap us. They're treasures. We'll be tempted to get more stuff. And the more stuff we get, the win. So the accumulation of the most stuff or the most money becomes my goal. And what happens is Paul is warning Timothy that people will wander from the faith when they do that. Because money is not a treasure to be had, it's a tool to be used. We're blessed to be a blessing, not blessed to just hoard all our blessing. I'll often ask people when I don't see them in a while at church, and maybe I see them in the grocery store, or I see them at church again. I'm like, oh man, I've missed you. I've missed you. Where you been? How you doing? And it's always funny. They kind of, get all nervous. Well, it's just been busy. I did this with high school students when I used to hang out with them a lot. I did this with young adults. I do it with adults sometimes. And I'm like, where you been? They're like, man, it's been busy. And it's one of two things. Usually they don't tell me, but I'm busy because I got a new relationship, and so they've kind of taken me off somewhere, right? You know the one that people tell me the most? I'm busy, man. Work is just nuts. School is just nuts right now. I'm like, why are you working so much? Well, I'm trying to keep up. It's a busy season of work, and I'm getting paid, and I got to make sure I keep. I'm like, wow, really? Man, why are you doing so much school right now? Why is it so, because I want to make sure I get in the career. I want to make sure I have the education to get in the job. And I'm not trying to guilt you, but I think what Paul's warning us is you might wander from the faith. I always get awkward when people tell me they're too busy working. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry I asked. When really, I think I should be more concerned about it. Like if you've wandered from the faith because you're working so much or you're in school so much, trying to get a job that you want, I think Paul is warning us. He's warning us that you might actually pierce yourself with many griefs, to use his words. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17, look at it. I'm commanded as one of your pastors to tell you that God does not want you to put your hope in wealth, because riches are uncertain and unstable, and you might arrogantly think that riches have the security that you're looking for and will lead to the good life that you've always wanted. And I'm telling you, it won't. It won't. Check me. God wants me to tell you that. 2, treasures not only blind us to God, they blind us to others. Greed misses others' needs and elevates our desires, our wants, to an obsession, an unhealthy obsession. James 4 says this: what causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You desire, but you do not have, so you kill. You covet, but you cannot get what you want, so you quarrel and fight. What's he saying? I think he's saying that treasures blind us to community. It actually will kill a community. It blinds us to others. We often fight to get ahead. We push other people down. We think of others and we ask a question in our minds. We're like, man, what can they get me? Rather than what do they need from me? And so we'll use and manipulate others. I think if you got a group or a biblical community that you're a part of, just go in your group this week and think to yourself, just rank everybody. See how much do you think they make and get it in your mind, and then go like this. Think how well they spend their money and how well they manage their finances and how good of purchasing they make, right? If you go in there and you start judging all that, I'm telling you, it will change the relational dynamics in that community very quickly. In your heart, you'll feel it, right? Even if they don't know. And it'll kill community. It does. Please don't do that, by the way, this week. But not only will it kill community, greed will neglect the poor. It'll neglect the poor. Proverbs 14:31. Whoever oppresses the poor insults his maker. Wow. But he who is generous to the needy honors him. Mother Teresa says this, the kind of the epitome of poverty and serving the poor. She served in Calcutta. She said, poverty was not created by God. It is we who have caused it. You and I, through our egotism. Egotism meaning this, that we don't believe God's there, but it's all me. See, what's interesting to me is fasting, what we talked about last week. Every time I fast, I think about those who are hungry, that are without food, that literally live their lives this way, and it causes me to be empathetic towards them. It's almost like what Jesus is continuing with is he's like, every time you give, or every time you abstain from buying and purchasing, or give stuff away, it's almost like being empathetic towards the poor, like feeling it in your body. Feeling it. Third, treasures blind us to ourselves. Galatians says, if anyone thinks he's something when he's nothing, he deceives himself. Treasures blind us to seeing ourselves accurately as we are, which is creatures made of dust rather than gods. I used to listen to this podcast all the time. It was called How I Built This with Guy Ross. And he'd interview these guys who built these massive industries and companies and fast food chains. One time he interviewed 5 guys and kind of saw how they did. But I used to listen to it all the time, and it was fascinating. The last question he'd ask these guys and gals that made these companies that are just a massive, he'd always ask them this question. He'd say, how much of this do you think was luck? Or how much of this was you, like, gritting it out? It's interesting to hear these guys talk. Some of them go, oh man, it was way more luck than me. I just kind of stumbled across this. Other guys would be like, no, I did this. Like, I worked hard for this thing. And I think treasures, can I say this? Treasures can make us think that we're more deserving or that we're better than somebody else. You can think that we're more deserving than what we really are. Jesus says, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. See, it's great to have money, but it's bad when money has you. If we consume things, what Jesus is nervous about is that things will consume us. You remember several weeks ago, everybody's talked about it since past, and we're like now over it completely. It seems like that solar eclipse happened, right? What's a solar eclipse? It's where the sun is blocked by the moon, and that's where we see on Earth it kind of goes dark, right? You remember kind of watching it. Maybe you got your glasses and you're like trying to sell them now. I don't know, because you're like, what am I going to use these for a long while? Now, I got a silly question, and don't answer it out loud because you might be wrong and I'd feel bad for you, right? Like, I don't want you to feel bad about it. But is the moon bigger than the sun? The answer is no. The moon is not bigger than the sun. It's actually significantly smaller than the sun. So how in the world does the moon totally cover up the sun in a total eclipse like what we witnessed? Well, how does it do that? If it's so much smaller, the reason it does it is because it's so much closer. It's so much closer to Earth, and so it blocks our view of the sun. What is Jesus trying to get at? I think he's saying our treasures and our possessions are so much closer that it will block our view of reality, of heaven. That these treasures and our stuff will block our view of heaven. That we'll see this earth physically, but we can't see heaven. So what's the solution? He says this: relocate your treasures from earth to heaven. How do I know if my treasures are on earth? Well, maybe the first question is, did you hoard toilet paper during COVID? You remember those days? Right? Like maybe I lost perspective there, and I thought earth was the ultimate reality. Have you ever made an impulse buy? That might be a good way to tell. I've made an impulse buy one time. I remember being an intern. I was young here, checking things out, and this was a few years back now. And I remember my first paycheck here at the church. It wasn't like I was an intern. I was working part-time. I wasn't making tons. I was just trying to get through school and get through life a little bit, trying to keep food on the table. But I thought, you know what? I got through my first week or semester of school. I can't even remember. And I thought to myself, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go buy something to celebrate. I felt like, if you've ever made an impulse buy, you know what I'm talking about. It felt like I was possessed almost, because I had to get what I needed to get, because this was going to change my life and change my world. My friend, years ago, had a Jeep, and in that Jeep, he had this subwoofer, and we'd come down the street bopping. I mean, just killing it, right? Like you'd hear us from all over the place. And I didn't want to be that loud. Like I didn't want us rumbling, like thinking, is that thunder or is that just a subwoofer? But I thought to myself, man, I had this impulse, this possession that like, I need this. And so I thought to myself, you know what? I need something that lets people know that I'm coming, but just a little thump, just a little thump down the road. I could see myself kind of driving in my Chevy Cruze with a little thump down the road. So I drove that thing all the way to Walmart, the subwoofer store, which I don't think is where you buy subwoofers. I bought myself a subwoofer, a very cheap one, to put in the back of my car. I take it home to my house, and I'm looking at this thing. I get it open, and I'm like, man, I'm looking at the subwoofer, and there's no cords in it. There's no wires in it. And so I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, man, this must be set up through Bluetooth. And so I'm looking in my car, trying to see it. I'm looking up YouTube videos on how to set this thing up, and I can't figure anything out. And so I called my buddy who owned one in his Jeep that we used to go driving around with. And I called him, and I said, hey, I just bought a subwoofer, and I don't know how to connect it to my car. And he said, well, do you have the cords for it? I said, no, it didn't come with any cords. He said, where did you get your subwoofer? I said, Walmart. He said, what? You got your subwoofer from Walmart? I'm like, yeah, man. He said, well, you need to buy cords for it. I said, oh, okay. How much is that going to be? And he gave me the cost, and it was almost as much as the subwoofer itself. It was a very cheap subwoofer. And I said, oh, are you kidding me? And he said, yeah. I said, how do you install it then? He said, well, you got to kind of remove. What I did was I removed some paneling, and I kind of ran the wires up through to connected it to the radio system and all that stuff. And I'm like, man, can you come and do this for me? And he said, no, dude, it's been crazy season, so I wouldn't be able to get to it for a while. So you might want to call somebody and have them install it. I said, how much is that going to cost? And he gave me a number. I'm like, oh, man, I didn't realize that I had to buy the subwoofer, all this stuff to install it, and then have it installed. You know what I did? I took that subwoofer and I returned it right away. I'm like, I can't do this, right? Made an impulse buy. Because sometimes all we can see in our focus is the money and the stuff. And if all I can see is the stuff, and that's what really matters to me, that will be all that I can see. I'll never be able to see heaven. That's why Jesus says elsewhere, he says, it's hard for someone who's rich to enter the kingdom of heaven. Jesus is not so concerned, just so you know, that you have 2 cars or a saving account or a nice vacation. He's way more concerned about you. He's way more concerned about me. Jesus is concerned that our stuff will eclipse our view of heaven. Our stuff will eclipse our view of eternity. Have you ever seen the show Hoarders? I mean, that show stresses me out. I can't watch it. It's like roadkill. Like I don't want to see it, but I can't look away once I do. You know what I mean? And so when that show used to be real big and I used to watch it, I'm like, oh man, I don't want to watch this. It stresses me out. I'm like, there was one season called Buried Alive. And they were literally buried in a bunch of stuff and garbage. And you know what amazes me is all their stuff doesn't increase their freedom. It actually limits it. And I know that's an extreme example, and you might go, oh, well, that's not me. That's not me. Can I ask you 3 questions? 3 questions. Are you constantly having to reorganize your garage? Not just organize it once, but reorganize it? Is there stuff in my house that I've not thought about or touched in years? That maybe I forgot it's there. Do I have a drawer in my house that's called a junk drawer? See, this applies to all of us. It applies to all of us. So how in the world do we fight against this stuff and our treasures from crowding out our hearts? Set your mind. How do we set our mind on heaven rather than on things of earth? Can we get real practical for a second? I think the way we do this is we practice simplicity and savoring. We practice simplicity and savoring. 1 Timothy says, "For we brought nothing into this world. We can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that." Simplicity and savoring, it rejects the message of more stuff plus more money equals happiness, and it takes a new equation on. Less equals better. Less equals better. Because it knows the more we have to worry about. Jesus, after this teaching, next week, we're going to look at it. He connects treasures and he goes right into worry and anxiety. I think he might be saying something. Cue the line from your mama. More money, more problems, right? What does simplicity look like? Simplicity, Richard Foster kind of gave these 10 things, these 9 things, right? He says, buy things for their usefulness rather than their status. Reject anything that is producing an addiction in you. Develop a habit of giving things away. Refuse to be propagandized by modern gadgetry. Learn to enjoy things without owning them. Develop a deeper appreciation for creation. Look at things with a healthy skepticism of the all buy now, pay later schemes. Reject anything that breeds the oppression of others. Shun anything that distracts you from seeking first the kingdom of God. And then this one's just a personal one. I kind of added this to the list, if I'm honest. I'd say buy quality goods rather than cheap quantities of junk. A lot of times I'll buy like shoes that are $15. And it's amazing how quick those shoes wear down. I'm like, man, these are brand new. And I'll buy 12 pairs of shoes a year when I could have just bought one good thing. It's feeding this addiction in me. I think we need to practice simplicity, but what about savoring? I think we need to learn how to savor good things, to just sit in a good thing, to take it in, to soak it up for all that it's worth. Our world goes rushing around from one thing to the next, filling our life with stuff that we never have time to enjoy because our life is so full. I think of it, if you were to take out your phone right now, I'll just give you an example. Take out your phone. Look at how many pictures you have. Do you know how many pictures you have? I'm so amazed often at how many pictures that I have that I want to capture moments. And yet, there's very few moments that I just let myself be captured by, right? I want to make sure I capture it all. I think that's actually an eclipsed view of eternity. Like I might be afraid of missing something rather than like, you know what, this is a good moment. I want to sit in it, enjoy it for all it's worth. Do you remember TV shows? I remember Star Wars, The Clone Wars coming out when I was in middle school, high school, and just so excited for each season to come out and each episode. And those were the good days. I think they were good days. When it wasn't all streamed. You couldn't binge watch a show. That show would come out episode by episode by episode once a week, Friday nights. And I remember it was like Wednesday, and I'm like, 2 days till Friday, man. Can't wait. We're going to come back from the football game. I'm going to turn on Star Wars, The Clone Wars, get me a bowl of popcorn. We're going to make this a night. I'm going to have my buddy over. We're going to watch it together, and then we're going to hang out the rest of the night. It's going to be awesome. We're going to talk about it. It's going to be amazing, right? And now I think we just binge shows like they're not that great anyway, and we just kind of whatever. What would it look like to sit back, to bring back that, man? We practice simplicity, savoring, but we practice generosity and gratitude. Generosity, if less is better than less, I think also says it's enough. Generosity and gratitude says that. If you look at when God gives his life away on the cross, when Jesus gave his life away, it has a ripple effect through the church. Look at Acts 2 sometime. When you look at Acts 2, what you'll find is this. They're just like, they look at each other. And they're like, bro, if you need some cash, if you're hurting for some cash, here's my wallet. Take whatever you need. Like, I got you. Don't worry about it. Like they live with this radical generosity, and generosity has this way of looking out for each other. C.S. Lewis says this, "I do not believe anyone can settle how much we ought to give." I think he's right. But he says this also. He says, "I'm afraid the only safe rule is to give more than we can spare. If our charities do not at all pinch or hamper us, I should say they are too small. There ought to be things we should like to do and cannot do because our charitable expenditure excludes them. Do I have a regular plan to be generous? And does my generosity hamper my comforts? Because it probably should. Jesus did not come to make our lives super, uber comfortable. Jesus' life, he was a homeless man who walked around. He didn't live in a palace. He was a king from a different kingdom. Colossians 3:15 says, "Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts. Since as members of one body you are called to peace, and be thankful." It's interesting. Paul connects thankfulness to peace. Did you know gratitude and anxiety cannot coexist in your brain at the same moment? They can't. Gratitude is powerful. Keeping a gratitude journal for 3 weeks, just writing a couple things down a night that you are very grateful for, thankful for, can increase your happiness by 25%, allow you to sleep better and have more energy during the day. That's the power of gratitude by itself. That's not even like with God or honoring any kind of religious thing. That's just gratitude itself. Gratitude kind of caps its lifestyle and chooses to be content and just says, you know what? I've had enough. That's enough. I don't need any more. When's the last time I've said that? I think some of us, we need to set up, you know how a lot of times we'll talk about like sexual things, like when it comes to our digital devices and stuff, like you should have blocks to some of that stuff. I think that is so good and so healthy. But I honestly think some of us, we need to set up a block on our phone for the Amazon app. Because I'll find myself just scrolling through Amazon going, oh man, I don't have that. What about Facebook Marketplace? I'm like, oh, I don't have that. I could want that. Oh man, that would be nice to have. What about Zillow? Like, man, I live in a house or I'm renting a place, but I'm always scrolling to just see. It's like our world's kind of created in us this desire for more. And I think what we stare at will seem to give us our source of security, meaning, satisfaction. And what Jesus is saying is you need to stare at something otherworldly to find your source of satisfaction, security, and meaning in. Because you will not find it here. You will not fully find it here. Jesus says, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Not you shouldn't serve both God and money, not that it's a bad idea, not that you won't want to. He says you cannot serve God and money. Can we say it this way? Track your treasures to find your master. Money is like a map that will chart back to what my soul really wants and longs for. Isn't it funny how some money just flies out of your pockets? Like it just flies out of your pockets. It's easy to spend. There's some money that's easy to spend. For me, it's books. It's a meal. Like it's easy for me to spend money on a bunch of books and easy for me to spend money on meals. And then there's some money that's really hard to spend. Like gas money for me. I'm like, man, I don't want to buy gas again. Diapers. I got 2 boys that are in diapers. Like, I don't want to buy diapers. This is hard money to spend. It's expensive, and I'm like, man, I don't want to spend that. Right? It's like around here. It's easy to spend money at Durbin's ice cream, but it's really hard for me to spend money at Scoop's ice cream. You know what I mean? Like maybe you disagree with that, but I'm just being honest, right? Why is some money easy to spend? I think some money's easy to spend because it's doing something for me. It's doing something for me and I like it. Other money's harder to spend because it's not doing something for me. Money is a compass. It's a compass and it points to my master. It points to the thing that I desire and the thing that I want most. See, treasures bring out the pirate and the scoundrel in all of us. Can I show you something real quick? I brought with me a treasure chest, okay? Treasure chest. I almost wonder if what Jesus is trying to say is, I know you think this is what you really want. Like, I really want some new clothes. But he said, if you peek in that treasure chest, you'll find actually what your true treasure is. I know you think it's clothes. I know you think it's that new workout program that's maybe more expensive than you'd like. It's that dieting thing. But if you were to open up that treasure chest, what you'd find is your real treasure is you're really concerned about how you look. And so how you look is your master. And you'll have to continue to serve that. I know that you think your treasure, is just food and entertainment. And you're like, man, I just really want some food, entertainment. I love good things. But if you were to open up that treasure chest, the treasure chest of your heart, what you would find is that you don't just want good things. Your desire, your deepest desire, is to feel good. So you're trying to fill your life up with stuff. And feeling good has all of a sudden become your master. I know that job that you treasure and those long hours that you treasure and the money that you make, honestly, if you were to pop open that treasure chest, it's because you find significance from that. The treasure actually in your heart is because you want more power and you want more control. I think Jesus is like, can I give you one that's personal for me? This was really convicting. It's when Jesus' message popped. It was easy for me to spend money on books and knowledge. Why? Because I think the treasure in my heart is actually to look really intellectual, to try and prove to you that I'm smart. See, whatever the treasure is, might be technology to show that you're modern and can keep up with it. Whatever it is, it's showing something of what your true treasure is underneath. David Foster Wallace said this: if you worship money and things, if they are what you tap to find real meaning in life, then you will never have enough. You'll never feel enough. Worship your own body and beauty and sexual allure, and you will always feel ugly. Worship power, you will always feel weak and afraid. You will need ever more power over others to keep the fear at bay. Worship your intellect, being seen as smart. You will end up feeling stupid, a fraud, always on the verge of being found out. The insidious thing about these forms of worship is not that they're evil or sinful. It is that they're unconscious. They blind us. They are default settings. They're the kind of worship that just gradually slip into day after day, getting more and more selective about what you see and how you measure value without ever being fully aware that that's what you're doing. Jesus says, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. If you want to know where your heart rests, open up the treasure chest. And what you'll find is this. You'll find the thing that you love the most. You'll find your master. Jesus, what he is saying is, I want you to have treasure, but I want you to have the richest treasure. I am the one who's honestly richer than anyone else. Jesus is richer than anyone else. And if you would come and follow him, what you would find is you would find status. If you want status, he'll make you a child of God. If you want to find self-worth, he'll give you a well that won't run dry. If you want satisfaction, he'll give you food that feeds your soul. If you want security, the cost of his life will cover you, your peace for eternity. If you want to find meaning, you'll find a partner of the King of the universe who has a kingdom agenda for your life. If you want to find joy, you'll find life to the full on tap. Jesus gives this parable and he says, the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went out and sold all that he had, and he bought that field. My fear is that some of us, we've settled for a cheap version of Jesus or Christianity that never tries to sell all that it has, but tries to rent that field and keep its treasure on the side. And what happens is we're actually missing out on Jesus. We're missing out on all that Jesus has and Jesus is. You and I, we must learn to treasure Jesus above all else. We must learn to love and treasure Jesus above all else. It's not enough to claim Jesus, you have to love him. It's not enough to believe in Jesus, you have to be amazed by him. You can't just be intrigued with Jesus, you have to be infatuated with him. It's not enough to be interested in Jesus, you have to see him as more precious and more valuable than anything else. Do you treasure Jesus? Do you treasure Jesus? Do you trust that he's enough? Do you know that he is all you need and he is all you got? And don't answer too quickly. Don't answer too quickly. Look at your bank account. What does it say? Look at your bank statement. What does it show? The secret to treasuring Jesus is to not stare at the things of this world, but to stare at a cross 2,000 years ago where God himself died on that cross. Why did he do it? Because he treasured you. Because he treasured me. And when I see how much God treasured me on that cross, that he left his honor, he left his status, he left his security, his power, his riches in heaven to live as a homeless man in a nowhere town in the Middle East. And he died a shameful death for you and me. When I stare and gaze into the reality of the gospel, what I will find is a God who treasures me way beyond what I could ever know. A God who loves me more than I could ever know. And when I stare into that, what I'll find is everything around here is worth selling for him. It's worth giving it all up for him. Stuff isn't a bad thing. But Jesus, when Jesus is your master, stuff, money, material, it all of a sudden becomes his tool. It doesn't have power over me anymore. We don't need to be stingy about our stuff. Can I ask you, do you have this eclipsed view of eternity? Do you think this is all that matters? There's some of these punk rock hymns that are real old that we used to sing all the time. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful grace. And the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. I'm singing a song to my son. I sing it almost every day to him, to both my boys. My one son is singing it back, and it melts my heart. It's this old hymn. In the morning when I rise, in the morning when I rise. In the morning when I rise, give me Jesus. Give me Jesus. You can have all this world, but give me Jesus. Can I ask you, do you have Jesus? Not do you believe in Jesus? Do you treasure him? Do you love him? Do you know him? Would you pray with me? Because, Father, I think there's people that are watching this right now that believe in you, but to be honest, money, treasures have kind of eclipsed their view of you. They've eclipsed their view of eternity. Some of us, we have a partial eclipse over our soul. We've just forgotten how much you love us. Some of us, we've never seen it. It's like a total eclipse. We kind of live in this dark, hazy, gray, weird world, trying to get more stuff, yet never feeling like we're satisfied. Jesus, I pray, my prayers is that we would find you, that you'd be that treasure in a field. We'd sell it all. We'd give up the need of wanting more, of accumulating stuff, and we'd come to find your love for us on a cross. That we would say yes to you, that we would grow in a deeper appreciation, treasuring you. And that, God, we would see your love radically for us, which would cause us to live in response to that, generously, simply, savoring this beautiful life that you've given us with just an explosion of gratitude. God, this is my prayer. I pray this in your name. Amen.